Welcome to the Flightcast, a place where opinions aren't right or wrong, and where we can agree or disagree about movies, TV, and other assorted media because it's all subjective. My name is Ray. Thank you so much for joining me. It's the middle of another week and decent amount to talk about today. Some of it heavy, some of it unexpectedly heavy. In fact, we're going to start off the show with that here in a little bit because I like to get the really heavy down news first. Some stunningly down news that just came down earlier today, actually, that I want to talk briefly about because it does affect me a little bit, as I'm sure it affects a number of others in my generation, whether you're a millennial or whether you're Gen Z, either way, it's going to hit you. But before getting into all of that, and plus some of the other stuff going on with respect to James Gunn's and Peter Safran's DCU update, and also some thoughts on Star Wars, including the rumor that it apparently was scooped and then was told by the actual sources, no, this is completely a rumor, nothing official, which, of course, Scooper Madness is going to Scooper Madness. But before getting into all of that, definitely want to remind everybody here, especially if you are a first-time listener, that you can find this show and all of my other shows at theflightcast.com or wherever you get your podcast, whether it is Apple Podcasts, whether it is YouTube, because this is on the Flightcast YouTube page, or on Spotify or Pandora. You can find the Flightcast at any of those sources or whatever podcatcher you use. I do use Overcast from time to time as well for my podcatching needs. This show, the main show, plus Flight Chat, our feedback show, which we just did an episode of that a couple of days ago, had some good discussions with respect to the comic book world, the shared cinematic universe world, how the tables have turned on Marvel Studios and things like that. Plus watch updates, plenty of people. We've got a few people now watching Star Trek The Next Generation, which is always awesome. Always great to see new people getting involved in the Star Trek universe for sure. And of course, movie reviews. I do review movies here from time to time. Flight review. The last movie review that I did was for Captain America Brave New World. I gave my honest thoughts on that. There'll be some other movies coming down the pipe as well. I thought I was going to do something for the Oscars, and I still might, but I don't think I'm going to be able to make it in time for the actual Oscar ceremony, which I don't watch. I don't watch the Academy Awards like I used to back in the day. It just kind of fell out of favor with that personally, but I always, root for the success of those particular actors and creatives that I definitely, am a fan of in that regard. But flight review plus Flightbox may also be making a comeback, truthfully, because there's some television. We're about to get neck deep into some television going on here. Daredevil Born Again coming out next week. One of the shows that we'll talk about here in a little bit, Andor Season 2 coming out in April. We've definitely got some TV to talk about. So Flightbox, which is the show that I usually do my TV reviews on, that may be making a comeback pretty soon in the very near future. But again, flightcast.com, Flightcast YouTube page, Spotify, and Pandora is where you can find the Flightcast show and all the other shows that I do here on the Flightcast Network. Also want to take a moment to thank all of the very loyal supporters of patreon.com/theflightcast. Hopefully you have been enjoying the somewhat more consistent than normal content this past week, because I did post a new episode of Flight Speed talking about the whole Kathleen Kennedy rumor thing, which I'll talk a little bit about here on this show today. But I also revealed yesterday my re-adjudicated MCU rankings list. I re-ranked all 35 MCU movies, including Captain America Brave New World. I have my new rankings, and I have posted them at patreon.com/theflightcast for your consumption, submitted for your approval or disapproval. So those of you who are Patreon subscribers, if you're a flight officer, you have access to that content. Let me know what you think, because I went through all of them and I gave my little blurbs and reasonings for where I have them ranked and where I have them at and what I'm doing, with respect to why do I have this here, why do I have that there. I guarantee there's some picks on there that people don't agree with. I guarantee that. But that's why it's all subjective, because we all have very different opinions on where things are ranked with respect to each other. But that's at patreon.com/theflightcast, plus tons of other content and more content to come as I finally decide to dig into the list and get caught up on all these movies and shows that I've been complaining for the last year or so that I've just been backlogged on. I need to start watching this shit. I really do need to get going on it, especially when it comes to physical media and my physical media collection, and stay tuned for a new development with respect to that once I finally get off my ass and screw up my courage and do the thing that I really want to do with respect to physical media. More on that down the road. Stay tuned. But thank you so much to those of you who are very loyal supporters of patreon.com/theflightcast. Hope that you have been enjoying all of the bonus new content that I've been posting lately. Stay tuned for more where that came from. Seriously, I mean it. I promise this time. All right, let's get into it. And let's get the heavy stuff out of the way first. I usually like to get that out of the way first and foremost before we get into the geekier, nerdier stuff, if you will. We had some very unfortunate passings that came down just within the past 12 to 24 hours, to be honest with you. Late last night, late Tuesday night, we got word that Roberto Orci passed away at the age of 51. For people who do not know who Roberto Orci or Bob Orci was, he was referred to as Bob by his constituents and his peers. He was a producer. He did produce the Kelvin Timeline along with Alex Kurtzman of Star Trek. Those three films. He was a producer on Transformers, Hawaii Five-0. He was only 51 years old. Apparently, he had a battle with kidney disease, unfortunately, and succumbed to that, I guess, on February 25th. So this just recently happened. It is very sad news. Roberto Orci, was a well-respected writer and producer. He started off as a writer on Xena Warrior Princess and Hercules: The Legendary Journey. Was partnered with Alex Kurtzman, who, of course, many of you may know, is the showrunner for the Paramount Plus era of Star Trek right now. Orci was a co-writer and producer on the 2009 Star Trek movie reboot and the two sequels, Star Trek Into Darkness and Star Trek Beyond. He was also a producer on the 2007 Transformers movie and Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. He also did some writing work on Mission Impossible 3 and The Legend of Zorro. He produced in the Now You See Me franchise, The Proposal, Eagle Eye, The Mummy, and The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which he also co-wrote. In television, he was an executive producer for CBS's Hawaii Five-0 reboot and on Fringe, which I personally enjoyed. I need to finish that show. That's on the Dead Sea Shows list. And Sleepy Hollow, for people who remember the Sleepy Hollow show with Nicole Bahari and Tom Misen way back when over on Fox. He also worked on Alias for ABC and Scorpion on CBS. He'd been on his own since KO Paper Products, it says here on Deadline, which was his company with Kurtzman that dissolved in 2016. His most recent venture was Rubber Room Media, a writer-driven production company. At the time of his death, Orci and his estranged wife, actress Adele Heather Taylor, had dueling lawsuits pending, each accusing the other of assault and abuse. Well, that's dark. That's a kind of a dark term. But seriously, with respect to the creative talents of Bob Orci and what he contributed to the Kelvin Timeline, Star Trek, and also the Transformers movies, which I enjoy. I do enjoy the Transformers movies. I mean, there's a lot here that he had his name on that, I definitely means a good deal to me in this regard. And it's always sad to hear, someone passing that early. I mean, 51 is nothing. Seriously, 51 is not a ripe old age by any stretch of the imagination. And if he was having kidney issues, that is very unfortunate. So may he rest in peace. Definitely made his mark, like I said, with the Kelvin Timeline, and just a fantastic job with all three of those movies. What he and Kurtzman did. The revitalization of Star Trek is something that you can really attribute to the both of them. Not just with the Kelvin Timeline, but also leading into, the remarriage between Paramount and CBS, which led to the revitalization of Star Trek on television, which is what we have now. 5 seasons of Discovery, 3 seasons of Picard, 5 seasons of Star Trek Lower Decks. We're in the middle of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Season 3 about to premiere this year, Season 4 in production, Starfleet Academy show coming out, among other projects. So yeah, the Section 31 movie, of course, which I liked and did a full review of that. Forgot to mention I did a flight review episode of that not too recently as well. But yeah, so sad news. May he rest in peace. Hearts out to the family and all that. Just, yeah, that's a bummer. That is definitely a bummer. But the bigger bummer, and of course not to compare passings or anything like that, but the more shocking one is the news today. And this is the news that Michelle Trachtenberg, Harriet the Spy, died at the age of 39. That is insane. That is unbelievable and just horrifically sad. And this one hits a lot of people in my generation. I read on Blue Sky that I guess apparently, allegedly, she recently had a liver transplant, and so she must have been going through some things, allegedly health-wise. I can't quote anybody on that. The family has asked for privacy, according to the trades, Hollywood Reporter and the like, that have been reporting on her passing. So we don't know exactly what the cause of death is, but 39 is way too young. Way, way, way too young. I mean, seriously. She was born in 1985. And, if you don't know her from Harriet the Spy, you probably know her from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She was in that show with Sarah Michelle Gellar and Allison Hannigan, among others. One of my favorite roles of hers, personally, one of my favorite projects of hers was Eurotrip. I love that movie. Scotty doesn't know. I mean, that movie is a lot of fun, and it's, it was in that vein of like the road trip movies, but that was like a really hilarious road trip movie. That one, it had a bit of more of an original bent to it, if you will, and just the chemistry and the grouping, and she was part of that, and yeah, I really dug it, and she was awesome in that film along with the rest of that cast. So this one hurts. I mean, this one, whenever you have anybody pass that young, especially with the amount of credits that she had and the impact that she had. I read somebody say that, uh, don't underestimate how many people are writers now because of Harriet the Spy. She was in also Gossip Girl, Adventures of Pete and Pete. So many other credits, so many things that we grew up with in our generation. Yeah, it's really sad, really, really sad. Unfortunately, it's very heartbreaking to for anybody to pass that young. May she rest in peace. She's definitely made her mark indelibly on so many of us, millennials and Gen Z, no doubt about it. That is very, very sad news. And this just came up. This just popped up today, a couple of hours ago. So I didn't want to. If I was going to talk about Bob Orci, I also wanted to bring this one up. That's a rough one. That's a really, really rough one. Really heavy, unfortunately. So I hate to start things out with heavy news, but it is what it is. We get that out of the way. We say our condolences and, get the heavy stuff going, and then we can move forward. So, yes, Bob Orci and Michelle Trachtenberg, may they both rest in peace, both making indelible marks on a lot of our favorite franchises and at least two different generations worth of movie and television watchers, for sure. All right, so with all the heavy, really, really sad stuff out of the way, let's get into the more normal first world stuff to talk about with respect to this week. There was a big update with respect to the DCU. James Gunn had a press conference. He talked to a lot of different outlets. All of a sudden, I see all these articles from all different places, Collider, IGN, Regurgitators, and the trades, for sure. For the purposes of talking about it on this show, I'm going to go with my old reliable. If you've listened to my show for the last number of years, you know that I trust the trades more than I trust, well, anyone else, whether it's bloggers or critics or certainly any of Scooper Madness. I do not trust Scooper Madness with a 10-foot pole. I'll talk about them a little bit later with respect to some of the stuff that they've been talking about that kind of got kiboshed, at least for the time being. But with respect to the trades, even within the trades, there are still some iffy editorialized things that they do. But by and large, I rely on the Hollywood Reporter. I go there because I like Boris Kitt. I like Aaron Couch. More often than not, and Kim Masters as well, more often than not, what they report is most accurate. And not that Variety and Deadline don't report accurate things as well. It's just I personally find most of my credibility with the Hollywood Reporter. So we're going to go with Boris Kitt's piece from Heat Vision from February 24th titled DC Studios Slate Evolution. Some projects put on back burner as others are full steam ahead. It says 2 years after James Gunn and Peter Safran unveiled an ambitious slate, the duo offer updates on what they found along the way and what has hit speed bumps. So, yeah, some updates on some projects. And of course, if you've been on social media, I'm sure it's the same on Twitter and also on Threads and Instagram and everywhere else, but certainly on Blue Sky, the regurgitators, basically when an article or when a big thing happens, when an event or a presser happens and there's a bunch of information, the regurgitators will take bits and pieces of it and they will stretch it out. They'll post about this thing here and they'll post about that thing there and act like each and every one of them is brand new news. I don't do that shit. Ridiculous. We're going to talk about all of it right now. Everything that is covered in this Boris Kitt Heat Vision piece. So let's dive into it, shall we? And there's a little bit of, not editorializing, but, obviously when for the Heat Vision blog, Boris Kitt's going to put his own type of spin on it. So, of course, he starts off by saying, in 1984, DC Comics hit a renaissance period, putting out titles that were really connecting with readers. There was even a well-known slogan from that era, quote, "The new DC, there's no stopping us now." Well, I was a year or two old, so I wouldn't have known that. But he says just over 40 years later, a case could be made that the same mantra is coursing through DC Studios. The Warner Brothers Discovery Division focused on bringing the popular comics characters to screens, big and small. Quote, "We don't want these characters to die out," said DC Studios co-head James Gunn at a press event Friday. "We want to bring new stories and new life. We want to introduce these characters to new generations, and I think we are doing that, slowly but surely." All right. Direct quote from James Gunn himself. It says DC Studios, which Gunn runs with Peter Safran, is just over 2 years old. Has it been that long already? Man, I'd been calling for the creation and the formation of DC Studios as its own autonomous entity within Warner Brothers for a while, and the fact that it's almost 2 years old is insane. We still don't have a movie yet, but they've been doing plenty of work, no doubt about that, behind the scenes, and that's what part of this article is about. It says, and its big test will be this summer's Superman, which Gunn wrote and directed as the division's inaugural film. Ah, yes, indeed. But Gunn and Safran, it says, are not waiting to see how Superman flies before making next moves. The duo are moving with the speedy deliberation of the Flash. Oh, yes, very cute, Boris. To get as many projects going as possible, maybe before anyone can stop them. Now, that's interesting. Now, that's speculation on Boris's part, but maybe before anyone can stop them would seem to suggest that they're trying to hedge their bets with some of these projects just in case Superman doesn't pan out. Because let's face it here, I've talked about this, and I know many of you agree with me, that everything is riding on the success of Superman as far as the future of the DCU, the future of this Gods and Monsters slate that they have put forth. Very little of it, if any, is going to happen if Superman does not come out the gate at least solid, right? Okay, I know there are going to be plenty of fanboys out there that are going to be saying $1 billion or bust. It's Superman. It must do this. It must do that. Whatever. It has to turn a profit. It has to be successful. It has to be a win for DC Studios with respect to perception and certainly with respect to the general audience. It's got to draw that general audience in. All the stuff that James Gunn has been able to do for the last number of years, last decade really, to draw audiences in for his Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy and also get, good marks. It didn't get the box office, but that was really because of the pandemic for the Suicide Squad, right? In 2021, all of that, he's got to bring that in tenfold for Superman. No doubt about that. And he knows this. He absolutely understands this and realizes the pressure ahead. But with respect to these projects going forward, here's where the updates start. Boris Kitt says, the space fantasy Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow is halfway through production in London. Wow, halfway? Didn't it seem like they just started filming that? Wow, that's crazy. All right, halfway through production in London. Lanterns, an HBO series featuring heroes Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart, began shooting in Los Angeles last week. For people that have forgotten about that, that is Kyle Chandler as Hal Jordan and Aaron Pierre from, Rebel Ridge on Netflix, but also Dev M from Krypton. That's where I know him from. He is Jon Stewart. So for people, just reminding everybody about those castings, yes. So Lantern started shooting last week. All right, so we got production going. We knew Supergirl was already in production with Millie Alcock in the title lead, and now Lanterns has started filming. Great. Fantastic. So we got 2 more projects that are definitely being filmed at this point in time for the DCU. That's awesome. Now here's a project that when this got announced, I didn't talk about it. I'm going to talk about it now. Clayface. A body horror thriller based on the Batman villain finally found its director and will shoot this summer for a fall 2026 release, it says. Now, a brief sidebar before continuing with this. I haven't talked about Clayface. I have not talked about that story. But yes, they did find a director. None other than James Watkins. And that was the story put out last week by Boris Kitt and Aaron Couch. He directed Speak No Evil. And apparently he's directing this feature film that is also being written, a script from none other than Mike Flanagan. Now, Mike Flanagan is a name that I've heard from so many of you and from so many of my constituents, right? People in my circles, Mike Flanagan this, Mike Flanagan that. When it comes to horror and those types of, whether it's, any Hill House or Gerald's Game, whatever it is, like, Mike Flanagan can do no wrong in the eyes of so many at this point in time. I've seen one of his projects, one, and that was Doctor Sleep. And just based on that one project, Doctor Sleep, I'm going, well, son of a bitch. Yeah, okay, because I love Doctor Sleep. Doctor Sleep is fantastic. Doctor Sleep helped me understand what type of horror movies I really enjoy. I'm not anti horror genre. I just need story. I just need plot. I just need character development. Doctor Sleep had all of that, especially with it being a sequel to The Shining. And since I own The Shining and Glorious 4K Steelbook because I got that new Walmart exclusive one that came out a couple of weeks ago, I need Doctor Sleep. I need to go on eBay and find that pretty soon. But yes, Clayface is absolutely happening, or at least it's been greenlit at this point. They have not cast anyone, but they've got a director and they've got a writer, and according to this updated piece, they're looking to start filming this summer, shooting for a fall 2026 release. So it's going to come out, well, it was going to come out the same time as the Batman Part 2, but that got pushed back further to 2027. So we're going to see Clayface before the Batman Part 2. I know there are some of you, the Anthonys, both Brooklyn Batman and Anthony Dorsey, that are going to be like, seriously? But hey, patience. Again, Batman fans, we have nothing to complain about. I'm turning my head to look at the shelf of Batman content that I have right now. We are happier than pigs in shit. At least we should be, right? We can be more patient. At least I can be more patient. Maybe I can't speak for all the other Batman fans here, but Clayface, going to be looking to shoot this summer. All right. Then it says Sergeant Rock, a period war movie to be directed by Luca Guadagnino, is actively looking for its star, and an animated movie titled Dynamic Duo is in production. Now, Dynamic Duo we heard about. That was one of the projects that we had heard about early on, like in the last year or so, as far as like an animated project that was going to be part of the DC Studios slate. This Sergeant Rock, there was some stories that came out that said that originally Daniel Craig was attached to it. I guess that got debunked, and I don't know if that comes up later in this story. But no, apparently they never spoke with Daniel Craig about it, and now they're looking for someone else to be the helmer for it as far as the lead with respect to it. I am genuinely unfamiliar with the character of Sergeant Rock. At least I don't remember him. If he was in like a CW thing or one of the, like Doom Patrol or Titans or something like that, I didn't catch it. Like that's an Easter egg that I wasn't aware of here. Let's see. Well, it says fictional character appearing in American comic books published by DC Comics. A World War II soldier who served as an infantry non-commissioned officer. Let's see. He's in other media. What was he in television? Let's see. He was in Justice League, 3-part episode, The Savage Time. I have not seen that show. Voiced by Fred Dreyer. Okay. Teaser for Batman the Brave and the Bold, The Plague of the Prototypes. Voiced by Fred Tatasciore. I know that voice actor, but I have not seen that. A soldier implied to be Sergeant Rock appears in the Legends of Tomorrow episode Legendary. I don't think I have seen that either, even though I've watched Legends of Tomorrow. Let's see. In the early 80s and early 90s, Arnold Schwarzenegger was attached to play Sergeant Rock in a film produced by Joel Silver, depicting him as a German-American before John Cox wrote a new screenplay unrelated to the previous drafts. I guess this all went into development hell, never really happened. He appears in DC Showcase Sergeant Rock, voiced by Carl Urban. I have not seen that. And he makes a non-speaking cameo appearance in Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 3. Okay. And I guess he's been in a couple of video games as well. Sergeant Rock on the Front Line for Game Boy Color, DC Universe Online, and Scribblenauts Unmasked, a DC Comics adventure. Okay. I have no experience with any of those. All right. So nothing that I missed, personally, with respect to Sergeant Rock. Nothing that went past me in that regard. But that's apparently in development. It says this August, Season 2 of action comedy series Peacemaker will debut on Max. Yes, the Season 2 that so many fans want to try and twist themselves into knots. Well, what's canon and what isn't? Like you care. Like it's really that big of a deal. And if it is that big of a deal, well, that's a you problem. But whatever. Season 2 is supposed to be debuting this year. It says smaller but key steps for the identity of the division included acquiring the documentary Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, which in the last several weeks won awards from BAFTA and the PGA, and unveiling its first Max animated series, Creature Commandos. No, I have not watched either of those. Yes, I need to watch both. I mean, look, I missed out on the opportunity to see Superman, the Christopher Reeve story in theaters. It's on Max. Why haven't I just sat down and watched it? I don't know. There's too much shit to watch. And why haven't I watched Creature Commandos either? There's too much shit to watch. Seriously, whatever. They're on the list. I will watch them sooner than later. Moving forward, it says at the meeting with journalists Friday, the Warner Brother Discovery's Burbank Lot's own dynamic duo gave updates on the slate and explained the ethos and strategy driving their decision making. That would be Gunn and Safran. They took over in November of 2022 after Warner Bros. Discovery had David Zaslav made it a priority to revitalize the storied IP factory after the merger of Warner Media and Discovery, blah, 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 blah. Yes, we know that prior to that, DC had fractured into several fiefdoms with actors, filmmakers, and producers competing for a piece of the pie. It was a dark time for the brand. Yeah, no shit, Boris. We know this. There are still people out there that believe that for some reason, The Rock and the Garcias were going to give us the full Restore the Snyderverse campaign, and I keep telling people, no, they weren't. They were going to give us the $7 Snyderverse, which would have been 5 movies of Black Adam versus Superman. That's not what we were looking for. Whatever. Hopefully the brand is heading in a different direction. And it says here, quote, the DC brand was being defined by different creative teams at the company. Each was pursuing their own distinct vision of the characters, the story. The result was not one DCU, but many, summed up Safran. He said this fracture proved very challenging to consumers and it chipped away at the identity of the brand. He would know. He produced Aquaman, he produced Shazam, like he was in part of, like he was a producing partner in a number of those projects during the dark time for the brand, if you will. Yeah, and to me, like a dark time for the brand, okay, I would say personally it wasn't so much a dark time as much as it was a fracture time. I'm more than willing to admit that it was a fracture time. But dark seems to imply that they did nothing right. Look, I own all 15 movies of the DCEU before and after the Justice League disaster, and I like things about each and every one of them, subjectively speaking. Were they the strongest efforts and was it a wholly unified effort, going forward with in a massive shared cinematic universe franchise? No, it wasn't. They didn't have a plan. Walter Hamada never had a damn plan. That's why it really bugged me when people use the phrase Hamadaverse. The Hamadaverse never flippin' existed. It still doesn't exist. He was nerfing stuff off of what Snyder had built, and he was going in no direction whatsoever. He was aimless. It was all over the place. Aimless is the best word that I can use to describe DC Films' direction before it got wiped out and was replaced with DC Studios, which is what we have now. Which, man, I'm really hoping that the autonomy that I've wanted DC to have for all these years finally pays off. Here's hoping. That's why I'm personally rooting for the success of DC Studios and the DCU with James Gunn and Peter Safran at the helm. But it says, moving on here, that from the duo's perspective, a lot of work has already been done even ahead of Superman's release. Quote, we've unified the brand, we've greenlit 5 theatrical films, made 3 live-action series, and are producing 5 animated series. This is from Peter Safran. My Adventures with Green Lantern and Starfire are 2 of the animated titles. Oh, okay. So we've already got a My Adventures with Superman, which 2 seasons in is really good. We're going to do a My Adventures with Green Lantern as well, and a Starfire animated series. All right, so that is intriguing. Wasn't aware of either of those until just now. But it says the goal for the company is to make 2 live-action films and 1 animated movie per year, while also producing 2 live-action and 2 animated series for Max per year. Okay. Now, continuing on, I want to reference that back to that here in a second, but it says the company aims to work in multiple genres and sizes of projects. Quote, we don't serve one kind of audience, so why make one kind of movie, Safran said, adding, working in a multitude of genres, it affords us the opportunity to allocate resources where they can make the biggest impact. We budget according to the demands of the story and the revenue expectations of each title. And while there will be connectivity between movies and shows to give that universe feel, the duo don't want each entry to feel like a chapter to a larger story. Here's where Gunn comes in. He says, quote, we remain steadfast that each of these projects work as a standalone project. So you can see Superman, you can watch Lanterns, without having to see both of them. Although, if you can, there will be special things in there for people who have seen both. Okay, so let's just stop there for a second. Let's unpack everything within those last couple of paragraphs. First of all, going back to their goal, 2 live-action films, 1 animated movie, and 2 live-action and 2 animated series per year. Solid. Seriously. Because one of the problems that we've been running into, one of the discussion points, as Marvel continues to churn out 2 and 3 projects a year, just cinematically, and then a couple of shows a year, the concept of oversaturation keeps coming up. Is there too much superhero content out there? And there are people starting to say yes. There most certainly are people out there starting to say yes. And how can you really necessarily argue with them when you consider that Marvel has put out 35 movies since 2008? Seriously, we're going on 17 years here. They put out 35 movies. In fact, in May, like around the 17-year anniversary of the release of Iron Man is when we're going to get Thunderbolts, the 36th Marvel Cinematic Universe film. And I'm going to see it, I'm going to review it, and I'm probably going to enjoy it to some level. But that's a lot of movies. That's a hell of a lot of movies. And then never mind all the shows that we've been getting since, pretty much the pandemic era, if you will, 2020, going forward. I mean, that's a ton. That is a lot for the general audience to ingest. And you see the issues that Marvel is having right now with respect to where people think they're going, what's the direction, people are considering phase 4 and phase 5 of the MCU to be aimless, and it really does seem like Peter Safran and James Gunn, at least from what they're telling us, they're saying all the right things. They're trying to do this differently. They're trying to scale back on the amount of projects. They're also trying to diversify the projects, because that's something that Marvel Studios has still struggled to do, right? Outside of What If and X-Men 97 and this new Spider-Man animated, right? This new Spider-Man animated show that came out. Like, what are they really doing, to really bump up the animation audience, if you will? I think, an important thing that James Gunn and Peter Safran can understand, and it sounds like they understand, is all the fans that, for the last decade or so have talked about how DC's at its best when it's animated. Okay, well, we can agree to disagree on that. But the fact of the matter is you're not going to ignore that. There have been a ton of DC animated projects that have come out in the last 20 years, not just shows, but plenty of movies. There's been a whole DCAU continuity formed out there. Scott gave me a list some time ago that I still need to follow and get through. But the fact of the matter is there's absolutely viability there. I've watched a number of these shows. I've watched Young Justice. I've watched Justice League War. I've watched a number of animated projects, Batman Year One, etc. And there's a ton more for me to watch. And so the idea that they're going to unify this, and they're going to make, like I said, 2 live-action films, 1 animated movie, 2 live-action shows, 1 animated show. That's 3 and 3, basically. So 3 feature projects, 2 live-action, 1 animated, 3 TV projects, 2 live-action, 1 animated. Great. That's fantastic, seriously. I think you can space those out enough that you can, it's not flooding the marketplace, because let's be honest, right? As much as we love for the idea of the animated, for the general audience to really just dive into the animated shows and the animated movies, the reality of the situation is they do not get the same fanfare, they don't get the same attention from the general audience. Yes, you're going to throw Spider-Verse at me, and then I will remind you that both of the Spider-Verse films, as successful as they have been, still I think that they, at this point, equal the amount of money of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, if I'm not mistaken. I would have to double check that. Now I'm curious. How much have they both made? All right, so I undershot it. Okay, I undershot how much money Across the Spider-Verse made. I thought it made just over $500 million. It actually made $690 million per worldwide with respect to that box office, which is close to double how much Into the Spider-Verse made, which was 375.5. Point remains that even though that's more money combined than Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, the point remains that it's just over $1 billion between 2 films, right? So that's, if we're talking 1 Aquaman or 1 Joker, right? I'm sticking to DC movies here, but hey, if you want to go Marvel, fine. 1 Avengers film, right? Okay, that's the point. Animated movies, they don't draw in the masses the same way that the live action movies do. And the marketing is going to be the same. The marketing is going to be different, rather. The audience is going to be different. So it's understandable that really people are going to look at this, the general audience, and they're going to say, they're going to see 3 live action projects. Or 4 live action projects, I should say. And that goes with the 2 and 2 that Gunn spoke about before. 2 movies, 2 shows per year. I thought that was fine. If you're adding animated into this, great. Fantastic. I think this works out. I think this is a good limit. And the idea of Safran saying that the budget, resources where they can make the biggest impact, and they will budget according to the demands of the story and the revenue expectations. I think that's a business answer. That's something that their boss Zaslav is going to like. That's what the shareholders are going to like to hear. They want to hear structure with respect to this. They don't want to hear that you're going to spend all the money in the world. They don't want to hear that you're going to balloon their budgets. They want to hear a plan. And this sounds like a plan. This sounds like a structured plan that Gunn and Safran most certainly have for this. And so then it comes down to whether or not they truly solve the homework problem. This is coming up even more. Look, the discussion around Brave New World, spoilers, just briefly here, small spoilers for anybody that hasn't seen Brave New World yet. There is discussion about the homework problem definitely, rearing its head. There are Marvel fans now complaining about the homework problem because Brave New World references a Phase 1 Marvel movie heavily. And I mean heavily. It is essentially a sequel to a Phase 1 Marvel movie. That's as much as I will say, just in case there's anybody out there listening to this that has not seen it. And so that's the question, is like, okay, well, should you have watched that? Is that something, like, that's the homework problem in a nutshell. And those are the waters that Gunn and Safran have to try and traverse and be like, okay, did you need it? Now, I still maintain that you can watch Brave New World and you don't need to have seen that Phase 1 Marvel movie in order to understand what is going on. However, extra context with respect to the character development and the arcs that are happening, yeah, you do miss some of that. It doesn't have the same emotional impact. Me watching Brave New World has a different emotional impact on me than it would on somebody that has not seen that Phase 1 movie multiple times. I've not only seen that particular Phase 1 movie multiple times, I own it. Because I own the entirety of the MCU and Glorious Steelbook, except for Brave New World, because it hasn't been released yet. I will own it when that happens. But how will Gunn and Safran traverse this? Will they be able to build a fully functional, fully intertwined and interconnected shared cinematic universe of standalone projects that don't feel like the homework problem is there? Like, that's the big challenge. And I don't know that they'll be able to pull it off, but I'm willing to see what they do. I'm willing to see how they try. I'm willing to give them benefit of the doubt and say, okay, they say they can do it. They're identifying that they don't want that to be the case. Let's see how that goes. And they're not going to please everybody. We're going to get fans that are going to say, well, no, clearly you have to see this, you have to see that. The haters are going to say that, and fans that just love to nitpick and, find misery in anything happy are going to say that. But I'm going to look at it and try to go, okay, you know what? I think they do, like you can watch this and not have to watch that, right? Because that's what the general audience does anyway. I've said this before, that when it comes to even the Marvel films, and I keep referencing Marvel because they're the biggest example of the massive shared cinematic universe connectivity that we're talking about here, the general audience doesn't watch all the movies. They don't watch all the shows. In fact, I've run into plenty of general audience members that have watched not even all the movies and have watched none of the shows. They have not watched WandaVision. They've not watched Falcon and Winter Soldier. They've not watched Loki. They've not watched Hawkeye. They have not watched Echo. They have not watched Ms. Marvel. And they certainly have not watched Agatha all along. They've seen none of the shows. They've only seen the movies, and they haven't even seen all of those. There are people out there that don't watch all the Avengers movies. I know people that have seen Endgame and not Infinity War. I know people that have seen Infinity War and not Endgame. And they still like the movies. They still enjoy them. But they don't need the completionism like we do as fans. And I know it breaks our brains as fans to think of people operating like this. But that's how the general audience largely operates. And if Gunn and Safran truly understand that from the get-go, and if they can truly build a shared cinematic universe that doesn't rely on overarching connections like what was built in the first three phases of the during the Infinity Saga in the MCU, it will be very intriguing to see how they put that together. That last line where he says, although if you can, there will be special things in there for people who have seen both. Well, that's us, because we're going to see all of it, right? Even the people that claim they're not going to, you're going to watch it. Even if you hate watch it, you're going to watch as much of it as you can because you want to critique it and you want to have something to say about it. So either way, that's who he's talking about. He's talking about us. But the general audience are going to try to gear it towards they don't have to watch each and every one of them. It'll be interesting. Like I said, I don't know if they'll be able to pull it off, but it'll be very interesting. One of the ways to go about it continues on here. It says one thing that is the undercurrent driving the division, and he keeps calling it the division, and I guess technically, yes, You could consider DC Studios a division, but it is not the same as DC Films. And we know this already, but I still feel the need, every time I see Boris Kit write this, I still feel the need to point out the difference between DC Studios and DC Films. DC Films was, as I love to put it, a rinky-dink division under Warner Brothers Picture Group, which means that those people, Walter Hamada, and before that Jeff Johns and John Berg and whoever else, reported to the Warner Brothers Picture Chief, who then reported to the big boss, the CEO of Warner Brothers, Kevin Tsujihara, or the like beforehand, and now David Zaslav at this point. But now DC Studios, the only person that Gunn and Safran report to is David Zaslav. They do not report to the Warner Brothers Picture Chief. They do not report to Michael DeLuca or Pam Abdi. They do not report to anyone else other than Big Boss. That is the biggest difference with DC Studios between that and DC Films. Always like pointing that out. But at any rate, it says that one thing that the undercurrent driving the division is the writing of the scripts. He says, this is a quote from Gunn, "We are writer-driven," he says. "We're not going to greenlight or put anything into production until we are happy with the script. It is hard enough making a good movie with a good script. It's almost impossible to make a movie with a script that you're writing on the run." It says scripts that weren't up to the duo's snuff have been displaced by other projects on the slate, and scripts that hadn't even been dreamt of have risen to the top of the production pile, with Rock and Clayface being prime examples. Okay. It says, Gunn says, "We had no plans making a Clayface movie. Even after scribe Mike Flanagan pitched what they felt was a great idea, there was still a wait-and-see attitude. Quote, he turned in a script, and it's one of the best scripts that we've read," Gunn says. This is from, so they weren't thinking of a Clayface movie, and it rocketed up because of Flanagan's script. I know the Flanagan fans love hearing that. Safran adds, "We've laid out internally a plan, but we're happy to pivot as we discover things in the making of Superman or Supergirl or scripts being written. There's a flexibility built into it, even though we know where the larger story is headed." And while Gunn and Safran didn't elaborate, it says, they did say they had a 6-year plan that would include an Avengers Endgame style culmination, a reference to Marvel Studios' 2019 climactic movie, which Gunn worked on as an executive producer thanks to his role as director of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Okay, so here we go. This idea of being writer-driven, I mean, it sounds like it's getting back to basics really with Warner Brothers as a studio, right? Before we got into, not that Warner Brothers has not done the big budget franchise thing like every other studio has done, but this idea of Warner Brothers being more creative driven and more writer driven has always been a hallmark of the studio for a long time, and it felt like they had lost that in the last number of years, especially with these buyouts occurring. And the idea, we've heard this idea before. They talked about DC Films being director driven and being creator driven during the days when Snyder was still working on his movies, and then they tossed that all aside and massively screwed that up with how they screwed up the DCEU in 2016 and 2017, and really messed over both Zack Snyder and David Ayer in that regard, and just torpedoed the entire franchise from that point. So the question is, do Gunn and Safran, can we take them at their word? Is this really going to be writer driven? Well, so far their behavior suggests yes, this is writer-driven. If they thought that Flanagan's Clayface script was that good that they bumped it up, if they thought the Sergeant Rock idea was that good that they're bumping it up, that does seem to suggest, okay, these are stronger projects, we're going to pivot that way. And this idea that they're giving themselves leeway. This is also where that autonomy comes into play, because in the old days with DC Films, this never would have flown. Some dumbass like Toby Emmerich, or any of the others that were at Warner Brothers Picture Group would have been like, no, you need to do this, da-da-da-da, and it would have turned into this big thing, and would have been all the division that they were talking about earlier in terms of, fractures and things going on in different directions. That's what would have happened in the past. This is Gunn and Safran in a unified position, sticking to their plan, but allowing for pivots within their plan. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. If they're the ones allowing for pivots beforehand, that can still work, right? It's not like, they're knee-jerking to a blogger reaction or to a critic saying something stupid. No, they're not doing that. They're allowing themselves their own latitude to go in a different direction if they see something that they think is a stronger project to move forward on. That's intriguing. That is intriguing. Again, we will see. We'll see if this really plans out in that regard. But continuing on, It says the execs acknowledged that some projects on the initial DC slate that they unveiled in January 2023 have met challenges that could bedevil Brainiac himself. Yes, cue it again, Boris. I don't need that, but whatever. It is what it is. Quote, we've taken a couple of cracks at it, but still haven't been able to land, Safran says about Waller, a Peacemaker / Suicide Squad spinoff that was to star Viola Davis. Waller has been a bumpy road, he says. I hate hearing that because I love Viola Davis and I am really jacked up about the idea of her getting her own show. I want her to continue playing Waller. I do. I don't want to lose Viola Davis playing the character of Amanda Waller. I think she is a badass. I think she's amazing. She's one of the best actresses in the business. I want to see her continue playing that character. So I hope that the road gets less bumpy for Waller personally. But it is what it is. At least he's being honest about it in that regard, being upfront and transparent with respect to it. Okay, they've had some struggles with Waller. That sucks, but all right. It also says the series on time-traveling hero Booster Gold was waiting for a showrunner to make time for it, but, quote, maybe he fell out of love, maybe he got busy, end quote, he says, but we had to pivot. Okay, so Booster Gold isn't happening. I'm not really beholden to Booster Gold, so I'm not really broken up about that. I know that for the last year, Kumail Nanjiani, like it's been all this. He's going to be Booster Gold, da-da-da-da-da. Okay, well, doesn't seem like that's happening. Doesn't seem like that's going forward. Another one, The Authority, a superhero group created in the late 1990s, it says, had a script that, quote, has had a harder time coming along, notes Gunn. It hasn't been much of a priority, he says. Okay, so that's 3 projects that were originally talked about that are not, on the front burner anymore. Waller, Booster Gold, and The Authority. And here's the 4th one. It says, additionally, James Mangold's take on horror hero Swamp Thing also seems to have cooled. Quote, we talk about it occasionally, Gunn said. All right, so if you were jacked up about any of those ideas, Waller was the personal one for me that was the most important out of those 4 projects. But if you're a Booster Gold fan, if you're an Authority fan, if you're a Swamp Thing fan, or a James Mangold fan in that regard, well, back burner. These things happen. It is what it is. It hasn't slowed down the production because, as he said, they've greenlit other things, and we know that Supergirl and Lanterns is currently filming, and Superman is in post-production. So it's not like the franchise has stalled, but they've moved up things. They've moved up Clayface. They've moved up Sergeant Rock. They've pushed back these 4. Okay. And then it gets to this point. He says, and then there's the Batman problem, or several. Oh, great. Let's see. What does he have to say about this? He says, despite strong efforts, any new movie featuring the Dark Knight seems years away. It's been 3 years since Matt Reeves' The Batman introduced Robert Pattinson as Bruce Wayne in March 2022, making over $772 million during the pandemic, no less, but a sequel seems no closer than before. Quote from Safran, he is yet to turn in, Matt Reeves, that is. He's yet to turn in a full script, but what we have read so far is incredibly encouraging. That's a quote from Peter Safran about Matt Reeves, the writer-director of The Batman. It also says that DC Studios is also concurrently developing The Brave and the Bold, centered on Batman and his son Damian Wayne. But although it was announced in 2023 that Andy Muschietti would direct the feature and be a producer on it, the filmmaker behind the Flash and It movies seems to be at arm's length from the project. Quote from Safran, we're developing The Brave and the Bold script right now, and he'll be the first one to see it, referring to Muschietti while also strongly implying that the filmmaker is not involved in the project's development. Gunn added and went so far as to say he was now the driving force of the title. Quote, everyone knows I love Batman, and it's important to me, so I'm working very closely with the writer on Brave and the Bold, he said. The writer's name was not revealed. Intriguing. I wonder who that writer is that they settled on. I don't have any issues with Gunn being involved in the production of Batman. I really don't, especially since he's doing Superman. Now, I don't want him to write and direct both films, but the idea of him being involved in the creative process, yeah, because ultimately we do want a Batman that matches the Superman that he's built for this universe, right? I mean, that's what Zack Snyder did. He made a Batman with Ben Affleck that matched Henry Cavill's Superman in BVS and certainly in Zack Snyder's Justice League, right? So we want the aesthetic of those 2 heroes most certainly to match. So I have no issues with Gunn working with a writer to do that before it's handed off to Muschietti or whoever ends up directing The Brave and the Bold. I'm fine with that. I have no issues. Here's the paragraph. I wish this was in bolded, blinking letters. Let me read this as loudly as possible. And I know that people here listen to this show, you get where I'm coming from on this, but still, just to make it abundantly clear, it says, Gunn poured cold water that Pattinson would star as Batman in Brave and the Bold and bristled at the word sharing the actor with Reeves. He said there were no serious conversations about the actor continuing his role into the broader DCU rather than staying in the separate universe of Reeves' world. You know what? I'm going to repeat that because it bears repeating. Gunn poured cold water that Pattinson would star as Batman in Brave and the Bold, and bristled at the word sharing the actor with Reeves. He said there were no serious conversations about the actor continuing his role into the broader DCU rather than staying in the separate universe of Reeves' world. Are we clear on this? Are we? Are we clear on this, people? I know we're not. I know people are still going to fan cast it. I know people are still going to hope for it. I know people are still going to pray for it and act like there's still a chance. It's going to be that Jim Carrey gif from Dumber and Dumber. So you're telling me there's a chance. Yes, I understand. We're like dogs with a bone when it comes to fandoms. But seriously, no Robert Pattinson as the DCU Batman. Not happening. Okay? Seriously. Now, on the 1% chance that it does, fine. Have fun with all of your receipts. But right now, James Gunn is telling you, no, it is not happening. And Matt Reeves has also said, no, it is not happening. So let's leave that where it is for now, shall we? Moving on. It says the small screen also seems to have trouble in the Batcave. Okay, what is this about? While the Penguin, a spin-off of Reeves' Batman that continues to steal award after award, on Sunday, Colin Farrell did win the SAG Award for Best Actor in Limited Series. Most certainly he did. Very well deserved. There seems to be no plan for a follow-up, Boris Kitt says. When asked by a second season, Safran plainly said, quote, "We don't know. There are a lot of moving pieces, probably most importantly Colin himself, and 800 pounds of makeup." Okay. But you know what? This next paragraph, to me, sums up the answer. It says, right now, however, the focus is back on Superman. Gunn is returning to Atlanta this week to continue the post-production process in the movie, and while there aren't any major plans for DC Studios to be at San Diego Comic-Con, the division plans on making a splash at CinemaCon, the annual gathering of theater owners at the top of April. And while some may wonder if the character and embodiment of so-called American values or human values can sidestep cultural debates, Gunn believes he's the right Superman because he's not part of the cultural moment. Intriguing. He says, quote, "I think he's the right Superman because he's a character that stands for something that is solid, stands for basic human morals, basic human integrity, basic belief in protecting others and protecting the weak, being good to people and being honest," he said. People are looking for heroes right now. They're looking for values of goodness, looking for people who are good and decent human beings, and Superman is that. And it says they will leave no stone unturned in order to get word out on their first movie, adding that the full weight of Warner Brothers Discovery is behind Superman. Quote, "DZ," David Zaslav, I guess that's what he calls him, DZ, "loves what we're doing," he says, loves the movie, and has really rallied the entire company behind Superman for this summer. That's Safran is saying this. He says, "You've seen what can happen when Warner Brothers Discovery gets together behind a Barbie or a Beetlejuice or a Wonka or Kong, and that's how it's being treated right now for Superman. Everything that DZ has promised us 2 years ago when we got the job, it's all been a reality." All right. And that's the end of the piece. That is it. That is the massive update, if you will, from James Gunn and Peter Safran on the DCU slate. So, just talking about that last part, it goes into that whole, Boris Kitt went on that diatribe about all the trouble in the Batcave and how they're not moving forward with anything with respect to the Penguin or the Batman Part 2. Again, Batman fans, we need to be patient. And why can't we be patient? Listen, we love the Batman Epic Crime Saga. I get it. We love the Batman. I have said many times, including in my review, it's the best Batman movie made to date. I understand that. And The Penguin was fantastic. Phenomenal. Colin Farrell and Kristen Milioti, the awards that they have won so far for that show, absolutely well deserved. No doubt about it. But seriously, this needs to be the year of Superman. It does. Because we as Batman fans, like, Colin Farrell is, like, I've lost count how many interpretations of the Penguin we've seen in live action. I have. And we're working on our 7th Batman actor since Adam West in 1966, theatrically speaking in that regard, right? We're good. Seriously. At least that's how I feel. Look, you can disagree as much as you want, but Superman fans, David Corenswet, as I've mentioned many times already, is their 3rd cinematic Superman interpretation. 4th, if you separate Brandon Routh and Christopher Reeve. But aren't they supposed to be the same Superman? Yeah, because Superman Returns is supposed to erase Superman 3 and 4 out of continuity and treat 1 and 2 like they were the only ones that happened. And they reference 1 and 2 in that movie, right? So, as far as interpretations are concerned, 3 Superman interpretations in 47 years, 4 actors cinematically. That's not fair. Okay? Spider-Man has had 3 actors in 20 years. 3. Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, Tom Holland. Okay? Batman has had 7 actors since 1966. It's time for Superman to take front and center stage. It is. It's time for Superman to shine. It's time for Superman to get out there and get the pub. He's never going to be on the god tier level of popularity like Batman. But it is time for him to shine because Batman can sit on the toilet for 2 hours and make $500 million. He can. Seriously. I'm not joking. Batman movies just don't fail. They really don't. Like, Batman and Robin might be the only example of failure for a Batman movie, financially speaking, in that regard. But every other time Batman has made a movie, even Batman v Superman, yes, that's right, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice did turn a profit. It did put Warner Brothers in the black. Okay, it did not lose money, all right? Plain and simple. And that is objective data if you want to dispute that. And plenty of people to this day still disputing that fact. It doesn't matter. Batman's always going to succeed. It's time for Superman to be front and center. So the fact that Safran and Gunn's attention is on Superman for this year, yes, absolutely. Get that going. Get that rolling. Get the Man of Steel's house in order for once. That's how you kick off the franchise. And then you can bring Batman in. Batman's fine. Batman is fine by himself. He knows what to do. His world exists really well. We've seen it in multiple incarnations. We've seen it succeed in multiple incarnations with multiple directors, with multiple people in charge and whatnot. Yes, Batman will be fine. Okay, we're going to get the Batman Part 2. We're going to get continuations of the shows and the Penguin. Hopefully, I get my team up with Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman and Kristen Milioti as Sofia Falcone and Sofia Gigante, right? I would love for that to happen, to get the both of them together in a series or in the movies. That would be amazing, but whatever. I can be patient. I can be extremely patient because this should be Superman's time. Hear that, Wally? I'm saying that louder. This should be Superman's time right now. Batman has had his time. Batman has his time anytime he takes center stage. Anytime he pops up, he takes over the conversation. It is time for him to sit in the wings. I know it's been 3 years. I don't give a shit. Sit in the wings, Batman. Let's have Superman have his day. I say that as a diehard Batman fan. I can watch Batman content whenever the hell I want. Superman fans only have so much before they got to go into the animated series and TV shows to get their Superman content. That's not fair. Time to make things fair. Time to start making things more fair for Superman fans. So I don't have an issue. Really do not have an issue with their focus right now, and I don't have an issue with this update. They're saying all the right things. Gunn and Safran are saying all of the right things. I like what they're saying in terms of their approach. I like how they're being upfront with respect to projects that have been, like what they have greenlit, what they have announced, what their approach is going to be as far as being writer-driven, being honest about what's been put on the back burner. Like all of this, to me, this is a good report. This is a healthy report. This is an organic report. I'm good with all of this. I am. And right now, it's all about July 11th. We're waiting to see. Like that's the main event. That's the big one, July 11th. Put all the effort and weight. That's why the article ended the way it did, because that's focus. That is the main event. That is the target going forward. July 11th. That is make or break time for the DCU. We will see what happens. And hopefully, it ends up being a success. We will see, though. We will most certainly see. But yeah, I have no issues with this. This is a fine update. Lots of information, lots of transparency, and lots of them saying the right things. So my cautious optimism continues moving forward with respect to DC Studios and the DCU. So there you have it with respect to that. All right, let's talk a little Star Wars here. Shift some gears for a bit. That Andor Season 2 trailer, fire. Absolute fire. Yeah, I like the musical choice. I said I was going to look up. I talked about this a little bit on Flight Speed. I talked about how I was going to look up. I didn't know what that music track was. I was going to look it up and see who it was and identify it here. It's called "The Revolution Starts Now" by Steve Earle. It's not a song that I've necessarily familiar with. It's not one that I've heard before, but it was a fantastic musical choice. Outstanding choice, seriously. And you know, for people that the fans and the fanboys and that just the gatekeepers that just clutch their pearls and go, why would they go rock music? Why would they do that? Why would they destroy our beloved franchise? Get out of here. But please find a life. Find some grass to touch. Seriously, you fools. Ah, why are we complaining about musical choice in a trailer, especially when did you forget what Andor was about? Did you forget that Andor is the story leading into Rogue One and it's literally about the boldness of the Rebel Alliance? Did you forget that there's a revolution happening during the original trilogy time of Star Wars? Did you forget that? That's the whole flippin' point of the show. That's the whole flippin' point of these characters. The revolution starts now. That is a perfect song choice. How do you get any more perfect than that? Seriously, the only thing that might have been more perfect is if they'd taken Revolution by the Beatles, which that would have cost them a ton. Not that Disney can't afford it, but still, that would have cost them probably way more than this song did. But this one still fits because we've heard the Revolution by the Beatles like a ton. This, I don't feel like we've heard a whole lot. I haven't heard a whole lot of it, but I love the way that they cut it, and I love the way that it was interspersed. I love the action shots, the drama shots, seeing, Diego Luna as Cassian Andor, seeing uh, Stellan Skarsgård as Lucian, seeing Genevieve O'Reilly as Mon Mothma, like, and seeing all the new characters and seeing some of the other older characters' names I can't immediately recall at the moment. No, it was really good. It was really well paced. And, April 22nd is the release date. I don't have any complaints. I have zero complaints with respect to the Andor Season 2 trailer. It was fire. It was fantastic. And I cannot wait. It got me excited again. And it also reminded me that I need to watch Skeleton Crew because I have not watched Skeleton Crew. Yes, I am behind on my Star Wars television watching. I do need to watch that show. I will have it watched before Andor. I will. I will have Skeleton Crew watched before Andor. I've got time. I most certainly have. I got till April 22nd. Yes, that's enough time for me to watch flipping Skeleton Crew. Skeleton Crew I can get done in a weekend. I just got to pick a weekend to be able to sit down and binge that particular show. But you know me, I have enjoyed Star Wars on television. I have enjoyed all the Disney Plus shows. I enjoy the Book of Boba Fett. Seriously, like that's kind of the mark. And I think that's part of the issue that the Pearl Clutchers and the Gatekeepers have, right? Is they hear that rock music, they hear Steve Earle, and they think of the speeder bikes in the Book of Boba Fett. And it's just like, okay, guys, you know what? Look, if you're going to live in yesteryear forever, and if you're going to act like everything just needs to be exactly your way, then fine. Go sit in the corner and cry about how your childhood is being ruined, even though it isn't. You're just deciding to ruin it yourselves. I have no patience for gatekeepers, you know this. Anybody that's listened to me for this long. And I will hear no gatekeeping with respect to this trailer. That Andor Season 2 trailer, absolute fire, fantastic, can't wait, April 22nd, hell yes, appointment viewing for whatever appointment viewing is left that is in sports, we'll be watching, no doubt about it. We'll be doing some Flightbox episodes on that, mark the calendar, no doubt about it. That was fantastic. That's really the bulk of what I have to say about that trailer, and so that allows me to mention this. As fire as that trailer was, as outstanding as Season 1 of Andor was, in addition to the critical acclaim for The Mandalorian, at least the first two seasons of The Mandalorian, right? And also for Ahsoka and a couple of other projects. It's interesting how all of these projects seem to be happening under the watch of one Miss Kathleen Kennedy, but she never gets credit for it. She always gets scorn and derision for the sequel trilogy, and for making Rey a Mary Sue, and for being too woke by having a black stormtrooper, etc., right? And so, of course, when Matthew Baloney of Puck News decided to put it out there a couple of days ago that, Kathleen Kennedy is stepping down at the end of 2025, that, of course, the Nerd MAGA was ready to take that victory lap. And I think they probably still are, right? They're taking their digital victory lap, whatever, because they're the ones that have been telling us for the last number of years that, big, mean old Kathleen Kennedy, that mean old woman is ruining our beloved franchise. And it's okay because Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau are going to rise up and make Star Wars great again. I'm not joking. This is how these fools act. You know it. Go and watch them whine on YouTube. Go and watch them whine on Twitter. This is precisely how they act. That's why I call them Nerd MAGA, because they match the description of exactly what a nerd within that movement, within that cult, believes, right? But with respect to this news about Kathleen Kennedy stepping down, so Matthew Baloney, for people who don't know who that is, he's come up on this show a couple of times because a few of our past contributors to the Feedback Circle have talked about him, and I've talked about him a little. He used to be the editorial director of The Hollywood Reporter, but he stepped down, he left a couple of years ago, and he founded his own digital media company, Puck. He is essentially a scooper now. Now, he might have, because he was an entertainment journalist, and he podcasts and he's a former attorney, he may have a few more connections than, say, Humberto Gonzalez or people at the Wrap or like Heroic Hollywood or some of the other really disgusting Scooper Madness rags out there, but he's still a scooper. He does not work for Hollywood Reporter anymore. He doesn't work for Variety or Deadline. He does not work for an official trade. Puck News is not an official trade. So whatever he reports is technically a scoop. It's technically a rumor. And what I've heard is that apparently this is a rumor. Nothing has been substantiated. Now, Kathleen Kennedy may in fact step down at the end of 2025. And Baloney, to his credit, did at least say, well, she's 72. She wants to move on. She's been in the business for a long time, which a lot of the gatekeepers and a lot of Nerd MAGA don't seem to realize that Kathleen Kennedy has been a part of, she's part of the Amblin crew, right? She's known Spielberg and Lucas and those guys for decades. She's been part of that crew. Her and her husband, Frank Marshall, they were part of that group, right? She's been in the business for a long time. She's not a rookie. When she took over Lucasfilm, she'd been in Hollywood for a long time, well respected by her peers. And you don't have to agree with every decision she's made. You don't have to like everything that has happened under her watch. But this idea that she's just this novice that shouldn't be in charge for whatever bigoted reasons that you have has always been bullshit. And if she leaves, if she does step down at the end of this year, it won't be because of all the haters. It won't be because of anybody that has come at her. It won't be because of the morons that allegedly put in their hard-earned money to buy shares in Lucasfilm just so they can get on a conference call and ask when she's being fired. It's not going to be because of any of those dumbasses. Not Data Racer, not Nerdrotic, Doomcock, any of those fools. No, it won't be because of any of the bullshit that they've been spewing at her religiously for the last decade in that regard. No, it'll be because she's ready to move on. And why not? Seriously, for all of the vitriol, for all of the anger that these bullshit Nerd MAGA fans want to throw at her, she's got the box office receipts of the sequel trilogy to soothe her at night, right? Because her constituents look at that and go, oh, $4 billion. That's what it is, people. $2 billion for The Force Awakens, over $1 billion for both The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, respectively. That's over $4 billion. Then add another $1 billion from Rogue One. Okay? The idea that Kathleen Kennedy has not had a successful term as head of Lucasfilm is asinine. It's objectively incorrect. You don't have to agree or like all of her decisions, but she has been quite successful as the head of Lucasfilm. 100%. Okay? There have been, subjective missteps, right? The whole situation with Solo. Yes, Solo did bomb. Solo did go through some ridiculousness that was akin to Justice League in that regard, but it worked. It was course correction in a better direction instead of what actually happened with Warner Brothers and Justice League. Same thing happened with Rogue One, and that made over $1 billion, right? And yeah, it's been, now 6 years, going on 6 years since we've had a Star Wars film, but we've had plenty of Star Wars content on Disney Plus. And oh, wow, what a shocker. Disney puts out a new streaming app and they want Lucasfilm to make content exclusively for it. Wow, what a ridiculous idea. No, seriously, it's marketing, it's business. So this idea of where are the movies? I can't believe we haven't had any movies because they've been focusing on the streaming app. And then the pandemic happened. Remember when Disney Plus launched? It launched in November of 2019. It launched a couple of months before everything in the United States shut the hell down because of COVID-19, right? That's when we saw the first season of The Mandalorian. Everything since then has been geared for Disney Plus. And why the hell not? For a year, we weren't able to go to the movie theater. And then after that, we weren't able to go to a fully filled movie theater. It took a while for it to get back to capacity, and they're still kind of limping from that even now. Marvel has struggled like in the post-pandemic era. So this idea that like, oh, it's ridiculous that they haven't gotten a movie off the ground, it's part of the business structure. It's part of their aim. It's part of what they've been doing. And yeah, I know you're looking at how, well, Patty Jenkins was going to do the Rogue Squadron movie and that didn't happen. And we don't know when the Rey movie is going to happen. And the Mandalorian and Grogu, well, that's got Favreau and Filoni attached. So clearly that's going to actually happen. Well, whatever, guys. Seriously. The rank impatience and just a general, like, inability to understand like the industry itself and how things are going. Star Wars has been wildly successful on the big screen. It will be successful again on the big screen. They focused on the Disney Plus shows. They focused on the Disney Plus app for the last 5 years. Okay, it is what it is. Like, I can accept that, but a whole lot of fans can't. And it's all been under Kathleen Kennedy's watch. And again, the success of Andor, the success of The Mandalorian, the success of Ahsoka, and of course, the financial success of the sequel trilogy and Rogue One. All of that never gets credited to Kathleen Kennedy. I don't hear people say that. Like, even the people that, don't necessarily, like, attack Kathleen Kennedy, I still don't hear them say that. I'm sure there's somebody out there that is using that as a defense, but I will say it right now. Kathleen Kennedy has done more good for Lucasfilm than she has done bad. From an objective standpoint, in terms of money, in terms of revenue, and in terms of the audience, the general audience attention, she has done more to benefit Lucasfilm than she has done to harm Lucasfilm. If you think that she has harmed Lucasfilm more than helped it, that is your fault. That is you and your subjective opinion. You can believe whatever you want, but we have data. We have dollar signs. We have box office. We have proof. We have numbers from Disney Plus that say she's been good for Lucasfilm, as opposed to how you might feel about her. So it's a rumor at this point about her stepping down. It may happen, it may not happen, but it has not been made official whatsoever. So that victory lap might have to be, postponed. But even so, like, whatever victory lap Nerd MAGA wants to take with respect to her stepping down, yeah, okay. I don't think they're the type of people that we want to be touting a victory lap for, especially these other rumors, because, I'm hearing THR put this out, and I guess Culture Crave and the other regurgitators got it, that Kevin Feige is a front runner to take over. Oh, there's a horrible idea if I ever heard one. And the reason I say that is not because I don't want him to turn Star Wars into the MCU. No, it's not that. This is, why are you spreading him too thin? Like, so what? Someone else is going to be in charge of Marvel? Listen, if I were a Marvel fan, I would want him to remain where he is so that he can continue shepherding the MCU into a new era that hopefully will embrace the Fantastic Four and the X-Men and move away from the Avengers after these last two Avengers movies. It doesn't seem like that's going to happen because it really feels like the executives and the shareholders said, put the old crew back together so that we can get back to making $2 billion a movie. It really feels like that's what guided the RDJ as Doctor Doom decision. We will see how that goes. But still, you would want the guy that's been shepherding the franchise for the last 17 years to remain in that position, wouldn't you? I don't want him to switch over to Lucasfilm because he belongs at Marvel. Marvel Studios is where his passion lies. Yeah, maybe he's a Star Wars fan, but that doesn't mean he should just take over. And what is he going to do? Shepherd both franchises? No, of course he's not. He's going to put Louis D'Esposito or somebody else in charge of the MCU. And maybe that would work, but initially, I'm not in favor of that. I'm not in favor of that at all. First of all, Kennedy hasn't stepped down. She is still in charge. It is up to her whether she remains in charge or not, and we will wait for official word with respect to that. But beyond that, I think Feige is better served where he's at as opposed to going over to Star Wars. I don't want to see him move from Marvel. I want to see him stay at Marvel Studios. Again, not because of my thoughts on what he feels about, or what he does with Marvel movies, and I don't want, that to go into Star Wars. No, it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with just from a business standpoint. I think he's better served in the franchise that he's started with and has the most passion for, as opposed to moving in off of that and into Star Wars. But again, it's all rumor and conjecture at this point. It's all scooper madness at this point. I only brought it up because we're talking about Andor Season 2 trailer, and, again, something that Kathleen Kennedy does not get credit for, and probably will continue to not get credit for if Andor Season 2 is received anywhere near as well as the first season was. But, that rumor popped up, and just something to talk about in the interim, just as conjecture, right? We'll see what happens. If she decides to step down, so be it. It'll be on her own terms. And that victory lap is still going to ring hollow because it's all bullshit. They are not pushing her out. They're not forcing her to do shit. She's going out on her own terms. She's going to do what she's going to do. And she deserves that. She absolutely deserves the right and respect to be able to do that. And, I will salute her, and her tenure, because she has objectively done a good job for Lucasfilm. She most certainly has. You don't have to like everything that she's done. You don't have to like all of her decisions. You can personally feel that she's done a shit job for you, but you can't argue with the actual results of what has been put forth with respect to hard data and hard box office returns for her time at Lucasfilm in charge of it. So there you have it. That's that. That's my Star Wars talk with respect to this week. And that is going to do it for this particular episode of the Flightcast. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for supporting me and my podcast efforts as I continue to put forth as best as I can consistent episodes talking about stuff going on. If you have any thoughts with respect to any of what I talked about in this particular episode, if you want to pay your respects to Bob Orci and Michelle Trachtenberg, we talked about that heavier stuff at the beginning of the show. If you have any thoughts with respect to the DCU slate and updates from James Gunn and Peter Safran, which was the bulk of what this episode was, and certainly if you have any thoughts about Star Wars, the future of Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy, and your thoughts on that Andor Season 2 trailer, which I know many of us will be watching, you know where to find me on Blue Sky at Flightcast. There's also the Flightcast Facebook page, and of course I can be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. All right, take care, stay safe out there, have a great rest of the week, and I will see you all next time. Take it easy.